Should we begin? Okay, great. Hi, good afternoon, everyone who's joining us today in the lecture theatre and online. I'm delighted to welcome Antonis Kokossis to deliver our second lecture of our distinguished seminar series for this year. So Antonis is a professor of process systems engineering at the Technical University of Athens, but is actually the Leverhulme Visiting Professor with us here at Imperial College, London. So if you aren't able to join today, you may have a chat with Antonis at some other time. I'm sure he'll be very delighted. So Antonis' expertise is in process system design and process integration. So, and recently with a strong emphasis on renewable energy systems, polygeneration, and the design of biorefineries and industrial symbiosis networks. So among his many distinguished roles and appointments, and Antonis, I looked it up at your CV and it was so many pages long. So if you would like a full list of Antonis' distinguishments, you can look it up online. But some examples of Antonis' roles and appointments are that he is a national representative of the International Energy Agency, national representative of the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation and Synthetic Biology Accelerator, EU Research Infrastructure on Industrial Biotechnology, the Greek Secretary for Research and Technology and Climate Change, and the Computer-Aided Process Engineering Group of the European Federation of Chemical Engineering. And since 2020, Antonis has also been the Scientific Director of Symbio Labs, which is a spin-off company that relies on artificial intelligence and data technologies to promote renewable applications and societal engagement in the context of circular economy. During his career, Antonis has established collaborations with multiple industrial companies. There are many, but the list includes Bayer, Mitsubishi, Exxon, BP, and Unilever. And so please join me in welcoming Antonis today, who will talk to us about process systems engineering for the systematic integration of bio-based industries and renewables in the context of the circular economy.
Thank you so much for this warm introduction. This is supposed to be a distinguished seminar series, so let me avoid any undistinguished ordinary introduction, and I'm simply happy to be here. I'd rather explain that my research expertise, my skills, my interests are rooted in this place, and several of the colleagues, many in this audience, stand for actually my academic family, brothers, sisters, uncles, nephews, also students. With several of you, I have shared time in the United States. With some of you, we have shared the same supervisor. With many more, I have grown up as a young academic back then at the University of Manchester, then UMIST. At UMIST, or Manchester, the emphasis has been on conventional chemical industries. Since then, I have diverted completely, I would say, my research into renewables, especially the ones which are based on organic substrates, then energy plants, now so many other things other than energy plants. And above all, I'm a process systems engineering, so the actual presentation is a claim that process systems engineering is instrumental in saving up biorenewables. In many cases, I have to admit, is more important than the individual technology themselves. Is also a natural venue to data technologies without which many of our circular economy paradigms wouldn't be workable, wouldn't be practical. So before I go any further, a few lines about my affiliation and my alma mater. National Technical University of Athens is the oldest and largest engineering school, but above all, is the first choice of people who are interested in science and engineering. So in the end, we are a net exporter of graduates, many of them as engineers worldwide, many of them filling in academic positions around the world. So I will touch on the major drives of renewables and biorenewables. I will try to explain why a systems approach or integrated approach is important. I am using lots of mathematical methods and modeling and optimization, but during the course of this application, I will try to solve that through actual applications and problems. And I will naturally finish with my views on future directions in this area. So renewables are not just about energy security or carbon emissions or sustainable development. It's also about future technologies, new technologies, and future investment and jobs, in the area. And it is interesting to see what kind of companies invest in these areas. There are many of them is companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, these companies, as well as ours. There's a wide variety of products that include both energy products and biochemicals, but also digital services. And of course, our own process industries have a big share of that because they are knowledge experts, but also because of legislation. Climate legislation is getting stricter. And as you can see, the uptake of renewables continues to increase, and many developments are already in place. And these developments can multiply in connection with circular economy. These are figures from MacArthur Foundation, where you can see tremendous, impressive savings, in feedstocks and also economic potential. So whether the war in Ukraine will continue, whether we find new reserves for oil and gas, whether the price of oil goes up or down, we need to keep the planet alive, have a more balanced portfolio of resources, and apparently increased uptake of renewables. And out of the renewables, the largest portion, also historically, is biomass. More than 50% of the renewables are based on biomass. And biomass is the only carbon-based renewable that we have. And biorenewables have a first round of developments with first-generation plants. These were based on simple chemistries, single products, easy kind of chemistries. We have several plants. They are green plants, profitable plants, still that are unsustainable as they compete with food. They are more with gate-to-gate efficiency rather than cradle-to-grave type of efficiency. So the future would be on the more difficult type of biomass, which involves more difficult and complex reactions, which involves a full and not such wasteful utilization of resources. So the chemistries are quite complex in this case. You can get a feeling of what it is there. Remember that we don't target a particular product, but we're talking about product portfolios, and this would include both fuels and chemicals. This is a big future and hope for Europe. The darker the blue bubble, the more the developments. Promises for jobs, promises for growth. And what this kind of technology will need from us? Apparently, we need to make sure that they're sustainable, we can scale them up, and we can connect them with sustainable portfolio of other chemicals to survive. And what is the role of chemical engineering or process engineering? Apparently, chemical engineering holds the knowledge, and also, if you wish, the historical expertise of the conventional refinery. Conventional refineries also started with very simple, actually, with no chemistries, and they developed into a complex, kind of systems with complex chemistries and very efficient process. Essentially, every drop of oil that goes into the refinery becomes something. Unlike that, the biomass, as we will see by refinery developments, are very low in efficiency. So process systems engineering can be very helpful with the synthesis technologies to screen the chemistries, with process integration to build efficiencies, and with modeling to be able to analyze and scale up and design. Just a quick round of developments around the world. This is a plan in Denmark, 5 kind of platforms, 6, 7 type of products. Another one in Canada, 3 platforms, 3 different products. Another one in US, 2 platforms, 2 to 3 products. So many other developments in France and Norway, around the world, you can name it. Some of them will survive, some of them will fail. So one usual typical question that comes out of that is, what is the state of that? How mature, how ready we are exactly, with this? Over here, I borrowed this this analogy from my friend Michael Donahue from INRA, who draws the analogy with a termite. So it says that the developments of the state of the art is like this, beautiful termite. It has developed nice teeth. You know, it can process lots of different kind of feedstocks. Yeah, its mid-gut is also very well developed. And what you need to figure out and complete is the hindgut. So in process systems engineering parlance, this looks like a block diagram where you start from the bottom. You have some chemistry that you want to evaluate, and then you want to assess it on environmental and economic, criteria, and then connect it to a portfolio of other chemicals that will make full holistic utilization of biomass and, of course, build energy and process efficiency. Let me start with an illustration of an actual case, an Organosol process. This is a company now, it's CIMV, where the platform chemicals are 3, C5, C6, and lignin. You see the different colors, for the different value chains that you can develop. And the problem is how you can build a biorefinery on that. So we start from the bottom. And the modeling part has been the first kind of challenge. And over there, it took us quite a time and quite a lot of interactions with the people because the conventional models and the properties were unprepared to cope with a specific process. And overall, I have to mention that this is a very challenging area for AI and data technologies because you have non-conventional substrates, you have deviations from thermodynamic properties, and you have a lot of opportunities for data embedding type of applications. In the course of the integration, we have been able to save an unprecedented amount of 80% from what it was initially. This is uncharacteristic if you compare it with petroleum applications. But we also realized that the old graphical methods and thermodynamic methods as applied in the past have not had a chance without mathematical optimization type of applications because unlike these older developments here, you have to experiment quite a lot, so repeat this kind of exercises for so many scenarios. So here we want to integrate, for instance, a separation, and then the solution of this kind of integration would be this kind of, four compartment type of distillation that would not be possible unless with a mathematical approach. So mathematical models, as we saw here, the grand composite constraints which are shown had to be added so that you optimize. And here has been applied in a real process to identify the two pockets where integration was appropriate. And another application, which was much larger, 50 megawatts of energy, had to integrate against the background of the biorefinery. Again, here actually, we had to improve or increase the degrees of freedom. And as you see, we have found ways to almost completely find the energy that is required out of the background process. Similar kind of work for water integration. Here you see the yellow boxes standing for the water users in this particular case. In this water integration, we had to reformulate quite substantially the conventional models. We had to increase the number of integer variables there, and then we had to use cutting plane approximations to come up with targets for use and regeneration that gave us, a starting point for the network that you see here. But the exciting part comes when you have to consider the portfolios of different options. And of course, over there, you have to use more conceptual type of version of the models that you have. The conventional value chain presentation was not sufficient to count for the modularity that we wanted and also for the opportunities to integrate across different value chains. So we had to use Petri nets to translate these value chains into a graph that was next developed into a superstructure. And this superstructure, for instance, can be used to identify what kind of feedstocks are appropriate for a particular product, in this case, propylene glycol, or in case you have one product in mind, like acetone, identify what kind of co-products you should be using. And because of the simplicity, relative simplicity of the model, you can include logistics as well. Going back to the original problem in Organosol, we have used this kind of technology to screen for a different number of products that you could produce. And in combination with life cycle analysis, and you may say three traffic-like kind of color system, we identified the green-green type of solutions. And then we were able to fathom the original value chain into a much, much smaller kind of chain. So we have completed the selection of the products, but as potential products, still we have not identified yet which ones would integrate. So what we have is a reduced value chain that we need to further integrate for maximum efficiency. And total site integration has also been studied in the past, but again with fixed flow rates. Here in our case, oral flow rates are variables. So we had to completely reformulate what was in the past. So find, if you wish, a superset of cascades that we have to integrate so they can allow for site-to-site integration, as well as integration within the process, as well as the use of utility. So this has been the first part, and the second part has been the balances from the graph that I was showing before. So you have basically two components, one that accounts for the energy, one that accounts for the graph, and you can use this one. I mean, these kind of formulations are shown here. I don't expect you to be able to review what it is there, but basically an idea of what it is. So this is the energy part, this is the mass balance part. And then you can use this kind of technique to identify that of the reduced value chain, which ones integrate for the better value. So you can identify what are the portfolio products in this particular case. And because you don't believe that the model is accurate, you're going to have different energy cuts and identify a set of promising products that will come out of that. Now, this approach has been extended to account for scheduling. So in this case, you see 6 varieties of feedstocks and 21 type of process. We have included time in the variables, in the formulation. And then we have extended, the approach so that can give us the plan and the schedule, for the production. This is from a real case in Hungary. And you can also use integration to account for energy that is required for pre-treating biomass from one batch to the other. Here again, we have different batches in place. And finally, you can use also the formulation to mitigate the intensity of the integration to have more safer version of what you produce. What you expect, the more the products in the value chain, the better the integration that you will have. The integration has been also extended to account for the valorization of waste. So here we have to take our results and extend it with a superstructure that accounts for different options for waste management. And this kind of analysis gave us, for unrestricted cases, the minimum cost for a reasonable number of waste treatment process, a much higher cost. And the case that we have involved even basic type of valorization, like anaerobic digestion, we have turned this kind of costs into profits. We are claiming that this is a systems approach, so it has generic features. So as we go to other applications, it will work in a similar way. So let me quickly illustrate another one on algae. Here our pilot is more Dunyanella factory that produces a number of products, grows in open ponds in salt water. The kind of value chains here includes carotenoids, lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. And we have to identify again in a similar way what we were doing before, the 3-stage approach, as I said before. And the 4 main stages in this algal biorefinery that include cultivation, harvesting, fraction extraction, and product recovery. But before I go into the systems approach, let me go with the more conventional, the more logical evolutionary approach. Yeah, let's try to do that as actually historically this algal biorefinery have developed in Israel. So let's start targeting glycerol as one of the products, and this is more or less the flows that you need to integrate. And these are the different parts, and as you will see economically, this is an unsustainable kind of process. Okay, then you say, let us include now carotenoids as a second product. Yeah. So then I have to change my reactor, I have to change my solvent, I have to change my extraction processes, and as you will see, I have evolved in a completely different type of layout. So the good news is that you have made not an unsustainable process profitable, but the other kind of piece of information is that you have completely changed the product. And if you continue adding products, it's interesting that the flow sheet changes completely once again. So if you wish, the evolutionary approach is a good way to spend money as water, this is not something that will have any flexibility built into that. So the systems approach works differently, as we said. So we have the 3 stages that I explained before. So here we have options for different processes and different products. And as we bring all these different options together in the form of, a super task or a superstructure, we can optimize for different options and get some sort of target curve for the different performance. But other than the target curve, we also identify interesting or promising blocks for the processes that we need to involve, and also different promising blocks of portfolios that we need to involve. Efficiency is not the only thing in this kind of factories, because you're talking about specialty products which have very short market life. So flexibility is equally important as the need to co-process other things as well. So generalization of this shows more than one strength, worked in parallel. In this particular case, we can extend what we were doing before. We identify main products and also some sets of byproducts that may be relevant to a particular market, let's say cosmetics or nutraceuticals or whatever, and identify a new value chain through which we can do what we were doing before. Here I illustrate with 3 different strains, the Naegella, Haematococcus, and Anopheles. These are the value chains associated with them. So for each one of them, we can actually develop a flow sheet. For the second one as well, Haematococcus. For the third one, Anopheles as well. And then out of that, we come up with the 3 value chains. As I said, we will concatenate these value chains into a single one, and this is the single one. And then we have a set of units that we can integrate against this new concatenated value chain. And as we do that, we see that the flexible biorefinery is, of course, more expensive than each one of the individual biorefineries, but it's also almost 20–25% more expensive than the nanochloropsis, and accounts for 2 other algae as well. Now, in the context of symbiosis and circular economy, one has to involve social, urban, and municipal flows that we have neglected so far. So far I was presenting results, again neglecting these flows. As these flows are incorporated, then the supply chain, again, may reformulate into something completely different. But importantly, if you have multiple stakeholders, and actors, especially social actors, the problem becomes pretty complex. In this case, we use game theory in order to, as a basis, if you wish, to understand the role of the stakeholders, and more particularly address non-profit related criteria like threats, opportunities, stabilities. Also, I would say, identify the correct nature of win-win type of scenarios, rather than wrongfully using, in my view, the Pareto analysis, as this is very popular in the literature. We have experimented with extensive forms of game theory and bi-level optimization, and we're in the process to try mixed strategy, Nash equilibria, and epistemic game theory. Some samples of the applications we have done so far in municipal solid waste, where we identify that Nash equilibria are at low breaking states, and subsidies are not helpful. In marine lubricant markets, we have identified threats and opportunities in the market, and also confirmed the existing market share. And the most important or most exciting probably result is that in circular economy application, we have identified that conventional Stackelberg kind of formulations do not work. Okay, So in the context, again, of industrial symbiosis or circular economy, sustainability is not about metrics and indicators, but draws analogy with a living system. So we would call a system sustainable when it develops, close mass and energy balances with its surroundings. Yeah, ports are natural sites to integrate urban and industrial flows because they are not 100% industrial, they are not 100% urban. We have done that for 4 different ports using, again, the approach I explained. This is Malmö in Sweden. And here you see what kind of symbiosis network came out of that. And a significant potential of 150 megawatts. This is Wismar, it's a port in Germany. More complex kind of network, but smaller type of potential for bioenergy. This is a Greek port with a reasonable potential for bioenergy. And this has been the super success of this search. Mantova, it's not exactly a port, it's a river port, but it's connecting with Venice, where bioenergy came up to the impressive 700 megawatts, and this actually is already lined up for a biorefinery in the place. So far also I was showing biomass, the high quality biomass. But there is so much biomass which is cheaper and actually with a negative value. So here I just give you a feeling of what it is in plastics, where you have about 800 million tons of plastics from fossil-based feedstocks. 1/3 of them goes to the ocean, the other 1/3 goes to incineration, the other 1/3 goes to landfilling. Only about 5% is actually recycled. Most of that, all of that, is organic. So a more realistic or sustainable picture would be with large chemical recycling streams, reuse streams, and replacing a good amount of feedstocks, with renewable feedstocks. The largest waste streams are shown here, and significant part of that is textile waste. So textile waste has been the next project I was showing. Over here, the platforms include wool, include wool, include polyesters, polyamides, and the value chain is quite complex, but the value chain that we have figured out in this particular project is a smaller version of that. From the proteins, we target biopolymers from sugars, ethanol. From the polyamides, we target acrylic acid. And from the rest, we targeted PET. So this is the project partners that were involved in this effort. There has not been any other project where process systems engineering has not been more useful than that. The the blend fibers have been more than 50%. So the first bottleneck of the systems approach has been to identify the bottleneck. As again, this large amount of blend fibers didn't work out with the sorting of the pure material. So we had to integrate this stream in a cross flows with the pure sorting facilities for the other textiles. The second bottleneck has been the removal of color. So we had distributed colorization to different sections. Okay, this is shown here. And the final stage, we had to bypass, to improve capacity, bypassing streams that do not require decolorization. Then process and energy integration, then final design. So overall, it took 4 years actually to evolve, in more than what I saw as iterations, into something which was a final design. And this is where the circular economy starts. Because the next step, we try to identify replacements for the virgin feedstocks, with, other kind of more dilute versions, of materials, both solvents and chemicals. And downstream, identify which byproducts, which had a value, but which had very small capacity, could be sold, to other partners rather than being processed to end products. So this is the upstream flows. These are the downstream flows. These are more of the downstream flows. And the summary of the results, we start with a negative economic potential, very negative economic potential, to come up with something marginally, but something positive in the end. Now, biorenewables are not on their own, so they have to play with other type of renewables. For example, all these renewables, especially these renewables that produce hydrogen, and the CO2 capture units. The CO2 value chains are very much known to you. I mean, there are different levels of maturity. Methanol and BTX are very mature. Other products are less mature. Thermochemical processes, include the variations of gasifications, including chemical looping gasification, pyrolysis, especially the one which produces hydrogen of great interest, as well as hydrothermal liquefaction units, such as the one I show here. It is a pilot that we started at NTUA in collaboration with a Danish group. The integration of all this is most prominent with the production of e-fuels. So I show pictures from the ThyssenKrupp project. And in various type of scenarios, as I show here. Over here, we have a case of a hydrothermal process on the right that could pick up waste heat from a refinery, also hydrogen from a refinery, drop the product, as biocrude, into the refinery. The algae could also integrate, pick up some of the CO2, clean the water, recycle the water. So this kind of scenario, for instance, could integrate in terms of CO2. This kind of scenario could integrate in terms of hydrogen, where dark fermentation or pyrolysis could produce hydrogen mixtures with CO2 that could be either locally used as feedstock or integrated with gasification streams into more dense liquids, like liquids that we use for different purposes. We are very fortunate that these developments come very close with advances in data technologies, because the speed and the efficiency of what we do would be much lower otherwise. So the data engineering and applications can apparently automate several of our experiments, but also help us support with a new innovative type of process or emerging type of processes that we have to deal. Either when we have lots of data with deep learning kind of methods, or when we have complex models, to scale them down into something more practical to use, or much more in case of data embedding, correcting physical models. So I will start with one application that is bearing roots in semantics and ontology engineering. Basically, this is an approach, to translate. It's like a natural language kind of application. Translate, queries in English into optimization. To that, in the spirit of that, is similar to Piomo that is used, at Carnegie Mellon University quite extensively. So the idea is that you develop some sort of vocabulary for terms, feedstocks, process, products, also in terms of objectives, profits, whatever cost. And then out of this vocabulary, you create queries. Queries are connected to databases that collect what kind of concepts are related to this particular query. So these are databases of concepts and databases of numerical data. So once you do that, then you identify what components are relevant to your query. And remember that we have a data representation in terms of ontologies, so all these entities have properties, so they know about connections and relation with other ones. So they can develop automatically paths. So for instance, we start with corn stover, then we know that you can ferment it, then we know that you can produce ethanol, then we know that you can possibly dehydrate, then we know that you can produce possibly ethylene. And then you can do that for automatically, or the system can do that for you, for all the different processes, and then you can concatenate all these kind of things into one thing, which is like a superstructure, And you can generate all these kind of things automatically in the background, here and there, and over there. And then once you have this one, then you can develop code automatically using, say, Java. You can create, let's say, in our case, GAMS code that would develop the models that would run the problem for you. So this is how you create this thing. I have this thing which may be able to play. Let's see. Yeah, it's not big deal, but it's more or less shows what you actually do. You can go and select what kind of feedstocks you may want, and then you see on the right automatically you get possible type of products that are in the database. So you select whatever kind of product are relevant for you. It can be all of that. And then once you do that, then you have automatically a number of other intermediates that are generated because, again, from the system, we know what other kind of platforms are related to this kind of stuff if you have a preference for a particular platform. So you do that. So then you continue with all that. And then go on. And then it says that, OK, that it is, then actually what it does is in the next stage, yeah, OK. It says optimize, but actually what it does is it's writing the GAMS code. So this optimization, again, of the superstructure will come up, with final solution that should show somehow. Well, it does. You see in the background that has come up, with an optimized type of flow sheet of the flow sheet that was generated out of your queries. We have, as I said, we have a spin-off created out of that, where we apply these kind of platforms, also with GPS systems, for a number of customers. The digital twinning process intensification is a different type of problem. Over here you have novel kind of processes which are complex to analyze and simulate. So data technology can help you come up with more reduced versions of these kind of models, and you can also integrate into flow sheets. So this is, for instance, a case for in situ product recovery systems or systems that will combine reaction and separation as a single unit. This is very efficient also for biochemical and thermochemical reactions. Here I always show the illustration. I illustrate the case of IBE, which is isopropanol butanol ethanol. A reaction on its own has very low yields, whereas reaction with separation can improve the yields quite a lot, and you have very many options for separation. Can be a long list of separation you can select. And indeed, you can go almost to 100 conversion, out of these techniques, and you can build also model intelligence, that will account for non-ideal type of behavior. And finally, you can connect it to flow sheets. This came from recent applications that we have. An even more exciting type of application or list of applications is related to industrial biotechnology. Industrial biotechnology, over here I have, most of you at least are familiar with the work of Francis Arnold and direct evolution. The version of direct evolution in Europe is taking the form of a research infrastructure, this BISMA research infrastructure, and basically it's trying to connect strain engineering and design with process design. And these are different type of domains and contexts, and very difficult to integrate this type of concepts. So an equation-free type of representation would be a very promising way whereby you can interact, these different kind of words, with each other. So one type of, I would say also this is a particular challenge here, since you have to combine what you would call an allopathic system, a physical system, with an autopoietic system, which is a biological system, which is a system which adapts on its own. And the former is obeying some sort of first principles, and it can be modeled, with data embedded or whatever, in a reasonable way. Whereas the biological system, is something that you need to monitor somehow and understand also in terms of its own structure. Here we show one application in collaboration with EPFL, where we use genome scale models. Just to mention that genome scale models are not state models, so they don't describe states, we're more applying convex analysis. So we use this one to identify possible kind of kinetics. We use, and this is, and this is Oracle from EPFL, thermodynamically feasible type of combinations of this curation. And then we test stability, and then we come up with a smaller set of data. We do clustering, and out of that we identify possible kinetic models, that would match, real life kind of data. So this is the big cycle, and this has been in the middle, is in the production of muconic acid. We can also apply combined strain and process engineering using mixed linear programming type of formulations where we allow for genes to be degrees of freedom and the type of process equipment to be also degrees of freedom. And much more ambitious and extensive type of application is underway by BISBA, where the type of data that we plan to integrate include GSM models, include online and offline experiments, as well as different type of physical models. So this is pretty ambitious, but that would be a pretty handy service for people who work in industrial biotechnology, because they will have digital twins, in other words, replicas of the reality for experimenting and for developing their own stuff. I will conclude my presentation with an application of AI in life cycle analysis, what I have here as ex-ante analysis. So as you know, life cycle analysis that is applied today is ex post. So we start with some idea on the left, and then we develop some sort of flow sheet to account for life cycle inventories, and then we come up to calculate indices and all that. Now, what we would like to have instead is to, if you wish, reverse engineering the picture, understand how we should integrate our flow sheet, what kind of process we should select, what kind of feature we should select, whether we can change in a way that we can assist with the final calculations, if you wish, if we can and how we can change our initial kind of idea. So what we want actually is turn our ex post LCA into a more anticipatory LCA. So from a data flow, I mean, what you actually do in an LCA, ex post LCA, you start with some legacy data, background data, and then you produce a flow sheet. This takes time. This is probably the most time-consuming stage, and this is the kind of stuff that you cannot automate. And then you calculate LCAs in the end. So since you have done this work so many times, so we said, how about developing a repository of this kind of cases? So on the left, we have several of the ideas, like the ones I showed you earlier on. And then on the right, we have LCA results, and also we have the flow sheet, so we have the inventories. And the whole idea is this background data, legacy data, foreground data, and LCA data, turn into an input-output type of relations, where in the middle we will replace the whole thing by an artificial neural network or a decision tree. And this is what we have done using background sets, as I show here. They are relating to different types of biorefineries, first generation as well, but also second, third generation. The outputs are the usual stuff that you see in LCA analysis. We had 3 allocation methods and 2 sets of independent variables. And again, I mean, I will illustrate that with 2 type of developments we had. One has been decision trees, the other one has been data models. Decision trees more or less was intended to help us understand what exactly the system was telling us. The data models has been more to enhance precision. So in this particular case, we want to select products that would best valorize wood chips. Yeah? So this is a value chain that you have. And the two kind of criteria we used include climate change and CAD, cumulative energy demand. So remember, for each one of them, we have trained a decision tree. So decision tree for the climate change is shown here. Out of the decision tree, we can evaluate different options. The different options for CAD and the climate change are shown here. You see, for the case of CAD, the decision tree has done a very nice job. For the climate change, it has missed one case, but more or less, it has predicted, reasonably well. Well, the picture has not been that rosy, in all other places. So here we have a different type of application. We select technologies. So here we want to produce a particular product. We want to choose among different technologies, 4 different technologies. So using the decision trees, we consistently underestimated all the choices, but on a relative basis, we have still done a reasonable job. So as we compare one with the other, we have done a reasonable job. And the ex-ante analysis for artificial neural networks apparently have done a better job because we are involving many more degrees, as you train the thing. So for the young people who are interested in moving into this area, I would encourage you because this is very dynamic, very multidisciplinary, and you learn every day new things as you interact with so many other people. You may get rid of me today, but you're not going to get rid of me, in the coming weeks because I'll come up with other calls, and more focused material. This is acknowledgement to my team, to the people I've worked, throughout the years, and specifically for this type of projects. Acknowledgement to people, to sponsors, of the research. And this is my own invitation in Greece next year. We organize the Escape. So you are most welcome to come and be with us. And with that, I would like to finish and probably address questions and other things from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such a detailed lecture and all your case studies. Do we have any starting questions? Yes, Jason.
Very exciting. So I have a question for you. Oh my God.
I was supposed to say you have to wait for the mic.
I was going to just shout, but that's fine. So if, let's say, hypothetically, somebody had a biorefinery, hypothetically was at pilot scale, something more like CIMV than maybe Clariant's process, at what point, what level of information would be needed to help with the modeling of the process optimization for the full-scale plant design? What types of things would you need to know from a pilot plant?
With the modeling. First of all, it's not, it's a good question. It's not all the processes. It's usually the process that relate to biomass. So from some point on, you will start separating ethanol from what other things, so conventional type of things. So so this is one part. This is the processes that relate to biomass that matter. The other thing is what exactly type of application you're talking about. So it will be very different for a thermochemical process as will be, we know, with a biochemical process. And the third one is the feedstock itself. For instance, if you take hydrothermal liquefaction, which I also showed there, that would be extremely difficult thing to model because you don't know what you actually bring in. Yeah. Now, for biomass, if you have, let's say, the CMV, then you have poplar. It has been in our case. So biomass, can be modeled quite reasonably. This type of biomass because it's a clean biomass. Yeah. So modeling can take probably a couple of months. For hydrothermal liquefaction, it's tried for the last 3 years without much success. So you see, this is quite different type of variation. Remember that you can have activated sludge, other things that you can have as well. When it comes to waste, remember that, and I do believe, that the most promising feedstock is waste. And waste is the most difficult one to model. That's why I pointed so many times often that it is also a very big challenge. So for plastics, I didn't talk about plastic, but I showed these slides. Chemical recycling of plastics is extremely important, yeah? But recycling plastic, recycled plastic, has already deformed properties from the original plastic. So characterizing this kind of stream is very important because it has an impact on the product as well. And of course, you know, this presentation today is about bioenergy, but what I'm saying holds also true for, in the context of circular economy, for processes that do not relate to bioenergy. For instance, say steel, yeah? So in steel manufacturing, when you recycle steel, the recycled steel has also, inferior young kind of moduli rather than the original steel. So over there again, process systems engineering can offer a big help because there are people, I know people in Germany that they do stress analysis on different frames and structures where the young moduli of the recycled kind of steel will show what would be the impact of different kind of parts of the frame. Long answer to a short question, but hopefully I answered your question. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Claire, and then we'll go to Benoit online, and then you, Maria. Is that all right?
Thanks, Antonis, for a really broad talk. It was really great to see all the work you've been doing. When you talked about the flexible process design, you identify a portfolio of products, but presumably that depends very much on the prices that you've set for the products and the market demand and so on. Did you take into account that kind of uncertainty, or how do you take it into account?
Yes, you can take uncertainty in the usual sense, probability functions, and stochastic kind of functions, to replace what you have as nominal functions before. But it is a little bit more complicated than that in the way I have discussed with people who are in this business. For instance, it's not that much if the price goes down or high. It is whether you have replacements of this type of products in the category, in the markets that you have. For instance, you are in cosmetics, yeah? If one cosmetic doesn't work, but other cosmetics work, this is for them more important rather than this particular cosmetic to change. So they have an understanding of the market, which take me off guard. I'm not sure I understand exactly what they want, but there are these kind of things. That's why when I mentioned about this value chains, I also mentioned these market kind of things because this is more they're interested in rather than something else. Because these companies, let's say they are a company in pharmaceuticals. They want to be able to produce pharmaceuticals, If something, an FDA cancels one product, they will have other products in line. They don't want from pharmaceuticals to go to energy products because this is not their business.
Okay, I will read a question now from Professor Benoit Chachua online. He says, thanks for the nice talk, Antonis. Across all the applications you have presented, what were the major computational issues, for instance, in solving the optimization models? Or is it accounting for uncertainty and the lack of reliable data?
Well, many of the optimization problems you cannot solve because you involve so many kind of components in the optimization. So you have to conceptualize the problem in a way that you can approach, or come close to a solution. So if you go with a straightforward optimization approach, in very few of the cases, you can get results. So you have to conceptualize the problem in appropriate ways, yeah, so that you can solve it in each one of the cases. Now, when it comes to data technologies and all that, then spreads around so many other different applications that you can think about. And then I guess you mentioned optimization, right? So I restrict my answer to optimization.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question from Professor Omamata, who says, following on from Benoit's question, are there advances at the foundation level needed in systems modeling to be able to handle the example problems you've presented?
Well, the data embedding type of technologies that I mentioned before would require a different type of generation of models to handle what we typically handle as equation-based models. So equation-based models, I also use equation-free type of models that may be required in several cases. So rather than you have equations, you have to get rid of the equations and use data models only instead. So, yeah.
Thank you. Maria.
Thank you very much for the great talk. You actually picked on a super big challenge in biological systems, which is actually the adaptability of the models themselves to the biological system, because there are sometimes, especially when you do in-process optimization, your actual feeding strategy may change the biological mechanism in ways we may not even be able to understand right now. So coming from a process systems background, I'm often wondering, and my question is a bit philosophical, whether there is anything tangible right now the process systems community can do to enhance the transferability of the existing models to across products, first of all, but also make them more smarter, more adaptable. Do you think there is any combination of tools or specific class of models that could actually help us progress in that respect?
Okay, that's a good question, big question. I think when it comes to biological systems, the state of the art, let's put it this way, is use of online data or legacy data to monitor a bioreactor, and match some sort of performance. This largely neglects all these upstream type of data, omics, genome scale and whatever, because they cannot be integrated easily. So as we said, these are not state models. So you cannot connect them, in any way. So however, and people are playing with that, are starting playing with that, you can develop some phenomenological dependencies. So let's say as the pH changes, then this increases or this decreases, yeah? Or as oxygen, increases, this reaction is enhanced and this other one. So this kind of phenomenological type of relationships can be translated into potential functions with parameters for you to evaluate. So rather than let the data engineering do all the work, yeah, and assume, on exhaust degrees of freedom, in fancy functions that are not matching reality or nature, you can use this kind of models, to enforce nature somehow. Yeah? So this is also related to the previous questions about, this is a challenge, a modeling challenge, yeah, that may give fruits or not. So far, hardcore data analytics give better results than if you put constraints that relate to first principles. And from an optimization perspective, this is obvious. Because the more you put constraints in your system, the less the accuracy. Yeah? The more you put, if you have less constraints, then your matching would be better. Yeah? However, in that way, you match, also conformance with some principles, that you expect that this will obey. So this is one of the challenges in the future developments that I mentioned. Now, how you can use omics to that is very unclear to me, to be honest. The people in this infrastructure, they are optimistic that you can. For me, it does not come very clear how you can use that as not degrees of freedom, as part of the formulation itself. Not as, let's say, if I have this kind of gene, if I have this kind of protein come in, then I will direct my reaction, also into other places. But more to identify, relate the existence of a path, a biological path with a performance. So that's new grounds for me at least, because we are used to more conventional physical models instead.
Thank you.
Others?
I will read you one more question online. It kind of, I think, covers what you said already, but I will read it anyway. So it's from Kennedy Kasumo, who says, thanks for the wonderful presentation, Antonis. A great summary of the impressive portfolio of successful model-based process integration projects. Wow. He says, I wonder if model and process uncertainties, lack of experimental data to build the process models, lack of mechanistic knowledge, the resources, the time needed to gather data ever came to be a key factor in the applications.
Yeah, well, life is full of that, yeah? You know, so it's, you know, you have to live with this uncertainty. I mean, and there is much more uncertainty, you know, in the applications that I mentioned. Yeah, bear in mind that people are, yeah, anyhow. So that's the case. There's a lot of uncertainty around, and you have to live with that. And probably, I don't know who, I think Bailey has quoted that. A chemical engineering is the best person to deal with that because he is more comfortable, you know, to tackle problems that he doesn't actually understand. So, so I think that's the more you understand the principles, the more you get confused, and the more you want certainty about data and security about data. Yeah, if you are an engineer, you know, you have to be used to tackle with all that in a practical sense and deliver some answers, you know, in the best possible way. I think that's part of the job. I mean, with full respect to scientists, pure scientists, you know, who do otherwise.
Thank you. I have one wrap-up question. Have you ever had a case study where you looked at the results and you're like, no, I don't believe that?
Many.
Yeah? Can you give us one example that was particularly exciting?
Well, it was a case, I would say, in most cases, but the most evident has been the textiles. The textiles, where I couldn't believe the experiments. I wouldn't say I wouldn't believe the people, but yeah, I mean, but it was strange results. Let me put it this way. Yeah, it was counterintuitive type of results. So it has been, but this has been the case with most uncertainty. Yeah, because textiles are, you know, are not such clean kind of feedstocks as poplar. Yeah, it has not been so clean as algae. It has not been so clean as to many other things. So the uncertainty thing that you mentioned came up. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? All right. Well, please join me in thanking Antonis again for a wonderful talk. You have many thanks coming through online as well.
Well,
you can read afterwards. Thank you very much.